Welcome to episode 18, wherein I dwell on the subject of complacency and recognizing it. Complacency begins when confidence turns into autopilot. Routine numbs the mind, breeds overconfidence, and can border on cockiness. And that is dangerous. We hear it all the time. I've been driving for years. I use my phone and gadgets in the car, and nothing's happened. But they never mention the near misses. Or, I know this so well I can do it with my eyes closed. But they rarely speak of the mistakes, the losses, or the accidents that almost happened. That's how complacency works. Everything feels fine until suddenly it isn't. Let me share some of my stories on recognizing the trait both in team members and myself. The second officer or second mate is the ship's navigation officer. He's responsible for the voyage plan, the charts, the navigational equipment, and the 12 to 4 watch twice a day. In those days on long ocean passages with little traffic, he would also update records and make chart corrections by hand. At noon, when taking over from the third mate, he would carry out a set of routine checks, switching the steering motor pumps and telemotor units, testing the whistles, recording the ship's position and reporting the vessel's 24-hour progress to the captain in the noon chit along with the bunker fuel figures. One afternoon in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean and post-lunch between 14:30 and 1500 hours, I wandered to the bridge for a round. Something I did routinely but at no fixed time. The officers aware of the practice were thus generally vigilant during their watch. He was absorbed in chart corrections when I came to the bridge for my usual round. We exchanged greetings as I checked the equipment, the horizon, and the general condition of the bridge. I then noticed that the course recorder showed that the ship had been steering erratically for nearly 3 hours. When I asked the navigating officer what course he was meant to be on, he was startled. He rushed from the chart room to the steering console and realized that during his noon checks, he had moved the steering and telemotor 2-step switches to the center position, turning them off. It was a serious lapse. For more than 3 hours, the ship had effectively been left to the winds and the currents. While he was a capable and intelligent officer, he had obviously become both distracted and complacent. His silence and withdrawn manner afterward showed how deeply the mistake affected him. That is how complacency creeps in, when skill meets routine and alertness begins to fade. Oil tankers on time charter often learn their next port only at the last minute from the charterers. Even so, most of the Norwegian crude oil cargoes that we carried were usually headed to the east coast of North America, and the charts still bore the tracks of routes we had sailed many times before. After loading at Sture or perhaps Mongstad in Norway, we were ordered to sail for Delaware on the US East Coast. I asked the second officer to prepare the voyage plan and safe approach. Normally, I would review every chart and course myself, but this was a familiar route, and the officer was experienced, capable, and had sailed with me before. Trusting his judgment, I skipped my usual due diligence. As a result, I failed to check the routine passages for warnings, wrecks, shoals, and other hazards. All watchkeepers followed the courses laid until several hours before arriving in Delaware, I felt some unusual structural vibrations and rushed to the bridge to discover that the course we were on was transiting a shoal or a shallow water relative to the draft of the ship loaded, or of the loaded ship. I had to reduce speed rapidly, change course gently, head for deeper waters, and thus delay my ETA at the pilot station. It was a very serious lapse, especially with a fully loaded oil tanker. Thankfully, because action was immediate, we avoided disaster. We did not run aground, there was no oil spill, and I did not become famous for the wrong reasons. Lesson learned was that however competent one is professionally, with monotonous routines, similar voyages, similar tasks, etc., complacency does set in. So while the second mate had grown complacent, I had to ask myself, had I not done the same by relying on his past competence and neglecting my own routine due diligence? While I have several other sea stories, let me now come ashore and narrate another experience that reflects the subject. In my last episode on entrepreneurship, I spoke about being the master of my own ship and the artist of my own canvas. I encouraged people to learn, to grow, and take responsibility, even as many, including several women, rose through the ranks. But through it all, I stayed alert, guided by experience, and kept a close watch on the systems we had built over the first 10 to 15 years. In business, there is often tension between sales and accounts over profitability and the collection of dues. Alongside our software systems, I had introduced practical processes based on experience, including a monthly reconciliation of customer accounts. The head of accounts had no impressive formal qualifications, but over 8 years had risen through the ranks through intelligence, perseverance, self-learning, and determination. The processes were followed carefully as long as I monitored them, and weekly and monthly reports arrived on time. But as things became routine and my confidence in the team grew, I stopped checking everything closely and only glanced through the reports, believing that these were the company's future leaders. And then, while on paper the numbers looked fine, but about 9 months later, cash flow started tightening because collections were weak. So I dug deeper and found that the monthly customer reconciliations had simply not been done. When I spoke to a few clients myself, I realized that the receivables were nowhere near what our books showed. The reason soon became clear. Sales had inflated the buy and sell figures to make margins look better than they really were, and accounts had failed to reconcile balances each month. If they had, the red flags would have surfaced much earlier. Complacency had crept into people I trusted, people who had worked efficiently for years. The lesson for me was simple. As a leader, you can never stop paying attention no matter how routine things become, because in the end, the responsibility is yours. I also learned that rotating roles within a team helps keep people alert and prevents complacency from setting in. I could share many personal stories on this subject, but the truth is universal. Whether you lead a company, command a ship, fly an aircraft, drive a vehicle, operate machinery, or hold a scalpel in your hand, routine can quietly breed complacency. And when your actions carry consequences beyond yourself, that complacency can endanger lives. None of us is immune to comfort, overconfidence, or false certainty. The risk is not limited to high-stakes profession. It reaches into everyday roles, from babysitters to homemakers. In the end, we must realize and learn to recognize complacency when it appears, admit it, and act before it grows. Yes, memory may fade with age, but long before that happens, routine can lull us into comfort, dull our alertness, and make us careless. That is complacency. And a small accident, a minor oversight, or even a near miss should be enough to wake us up. Because if ignored, those small warnings can lead to major disasters. I leave you with a thought. Reflect on any near misses or accidents you have experienced, whether caused by your own actions or someone else's, that may have stemmed from complacency. And as always, please like, share, and subscribe. This is Captain Journey signing off.